Hi, this is Graham from Jenham's Astro. Since I first reviewed this telescope, the Dwarf II, there's been a new version of the app and also a new version of firmware. So in this video, I'm going to look at some of those changes and also look at some of the features that I didn't look at last time round. Then after that, I'm going to look at some of the deep sky images that I've taken since the first video release. So these are the versions of the software that I've now got on my phone and also the firmware on the telescope itself. It's a pretty simple process to update the firmware. You just follow the on-screen instructions. Last time around, I didn't really like the target library. It was very small, quite restrictive. But now Dwarf have really improved on that. They've moved around some of the menus, but let's not worry about that. If you go into the star target, you get a different set of objects listed in a separate menu. So you've got the moon and the sun, and as you can see, you've then got some pre-stored nebulae, but IC, NGC, Messier objects. A reasonable selection, not all of them of course. You could always find some objects that are missing. Similarly then, as a similar number of galaxy targets that are pre-stored inside the telescope. Moving on to star clusters, yeah, a good number. Then each of the planets, and finally after that we have some named and numbered stars. So that's a great improvement on the last version of the app and the firmware. And then it retains the ability to manually type in a right ascension and a declination, which was a feature before. They've really tidied up the interface so that it's much simpler to enter, just to dial in those coordinates, as you can see here. So definitely better. Last time around, I didn't really get on too well with the autofocus facility. It used to hunt around and not particularly get to where it needed to be. So this time I defocused the star, selected the auto option, and off it goes. Now I've sped this up a bit because it's a bit dull otherwise, but basically you can see that the telescope cycles either side of what it thinks is the best focus position, all the time telling you it's in autofocus mode, and then finally at the end it snaps to a good focus. So that seems to work well. Moon tracking. So I didn't try this before. The moon in this case was up in the middle of the afternoon. You basically center it in the telephoto field of view here. You can see initially in the wide angle. I'm using the new cursor up-down option, which I really like compared to the previous version of the app. So basically I center the moon, as you can see, and then in the function option within photo, you have an option then to, here we go, a feature rather, to select moon track, and it tells you got to have a level telescope, which I have seen is important, and then off you go. You confirm that, it moves the moon around and says that it's tracking. So basically in this case I left the telescope to do its thing and came back to it periodically to see how well it managed to keep the moon in the center of the field. And I'd say, yeah, pretty good. I'd say that is a good feature. It works well. Then going back to the initial connection of your phone to the telescope, I've sped this up a bit because it's quite dull. Last time I found it was a little bit glitchy. So again, often it tells me I can't join the network first time around. It spins for a little bit longer. This is 1.5 times speed. And then often it says connect again. And then the second time around, it decides it's going to let me connect. So the Wi-Fi connectivity still takes a few seconds initially, but to be honest, it's not a big deal. When I made the first video, the weather was pretty awful and I struggled to do any deep sky imaging. Since then, things have improved, and in this section of the video, I've just taken a series of the images from the last few weeks. You can see the number of frames, the duration of each exposure and the gain. And each of these images is basically what's come out of the camera, the JPEG, and all I've done is improve the contrast a little bit on my PC. I haven't restacked all of the subframes. So the Orion Nebula, Better image than last time round, just 50 frames and off to a good start. In general, what I've learned is that you need to increase the number of frames if you're going to get better images. And this is true whether you're using a telescope, a conventional telescope, or a smart telescope. So looking through these, I've gone through a range of targets, and each case, if the weather is permitted, I've tried to go to a larger number of frames, 200 or 300 frames. Some of the targets, like this planetary here, Messier 97, a little bit too small. Horsehead, I think this is a work in progress, probably better than my first attempt, but it still needs more frames when it's higher in the sky. And some targets, I've seen great pictures from the Dwarf II of the Crab Nebula, but for me it's pretty small. Andromeda, well, you can't really take a bad picture, and with this telescope it's very easy. So I've gone to a larger number of frames, 200 this time, and I think it's really got quite a nice definition. Moving on to nearby Messier 33, I've had a couple of tries at this and I'm really quite pleased with how much detail is brought up looking at 300 frames in that example. And then some clusters. Here we're in Gemini. It's easy capture of clusters in a relatively small number of frames, 50 in this case. And then moving over to Auriga, we've got Messier 37, which again is captured nicely. I looked for the rosette, I typed in the NGC, but somehow I didn't get in the middle of the frame. But again, even in 100 frames, with a bit of enhancement, it's not too bad. And then finally, I revisited North American Nebula. You can see not much color from the scope, but you can easily enhance that offline. In this case, I've improved the contrast as well as tweaking the color a little bit. So conclusions, well, having spent some more time with the Dwarf using the new software, I think it's a real big step forward. Definitely get better results if you can take the time to maybe do 1 or 2 targets a night. If you've got the deluxe package, use both of those batteries, put as many frames into each image as you can. And yeah, I think it's a great little product. Obviously there are other options on the market and it's up to you to compare their specs, but for me, I think with these enhancements and the continual improvement of software that's coming along, I still think this Dwarf 2 is a great little package. Okay, hope it's been useful. Thanks for watching. I'll maybe post another update if I've got something new to review, some new feature in the software or some new really good image that I managed to catch. You never know. Okay, bye for now.